The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're just waiting on some more people to join us, so we'll be starting the webinar at 6:05. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in this into this webinar this evening, hosted by Branch. My name is Ankit Saxena, and I am a technology evangelist for Branch in India. Branch is a deep linking provider for the top mobile apps in the world, and I work with some of the top mobile apps in India and the Asian market to help them grow. So today we'll be going over how some of the top apps have built mobile experiences for the Indian audiences, and we'll be covering about organic growth, understanding user behavior, and how to engage and re-engage the user. So before we dive into the session, we'd like to run a quick poll. so that we better understand our audience and we can cater our discussion around that. Perfect. So let me now bring in Ramit. Ramit is a product manager at Make My Trip, and I've worked with Ramit over the past 1 year in helping and growing the Make My Trip app. So Ramit, over to you, and I'll control the slides here.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ankit. Hi, everyone. So myself, Ramit Goyal. So I've been working with Make My Trip for 3.5 years now. And so I'm primarily working across, mobile product growth for Android, iOS apps and different and PWA platforms, and taking care of personalization bits plus other common platform, which is push notification services. So yeah, I'm primarily working on the mobile common platform in the growth side. So I think today primarily what we would like to cover is that I want to give you a perspective in terms of how Make My Trip is basically talking. How Make My Trip think about growth, how Make My Trip think about retention. What are the different things we are doing? Here at Make My Trip, which can help you guys in terms of that how you can think about your product to achieve the same. Right, and so we'll also cover some bits of personalization and some of the latest technologies that some of the latest trends that we are seeing in the mobile market and how we are planning to basically adapt to that. So that is the broad agenda for today. So I think we'll start with the growth, that how we can bring in growth, right?
Sure. One thing quickly, I just wanted to tell the attendees. Please, keep your questions coming in. There's an option with which you can send in your questions. After the presentation, we will go through the questions and answer those. Thank you. Ramit, over to you. Let's start with growth and retention.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think for every startup, for every company, growth is like really important, right? So, and every time when we say that we want to grow our user base, we want to grow, right? Some of the times what we tend to do is we tend to think of it as a standalone piece, which is that we want to drive user growth. But from my experience, what we have seen is that driving only growth does not make any sense in terms of providing a business value, because generally, if you see typically 80 to 90% of the apps, when almost 80 to 90% of the users churn on day one. On the next users will come on day 0, and 80 to 90% of the users won't even come back anytime after that. So and if you see typical, for example, M1 retention rates across all the companies, you will see not more than 20 to 25% retention rates. Only you will see 5% of the companies who have like better retention rates, M1 retention rates greater than 25%. So, from my point of view, it's very important to focus on growth plus retention combined as a strategy rather than only focusing on growth. Yeah, Ankit, you were saying something? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was saying that makes absolute sense. So, how do you do this at Make My Trip, and how do you, what are the metrics you track and stuff like that?
Yeah, so when we think about growth, so one is definitely the different growth programs we are running to basically acquire new users. We are acquiring new users through referral. So obviously, if you bucket that, it's organic versus inorganic growth. And the primary focus for us is to drive organic growth. So when I say organic, it's basically the brand growth, which is like Make My Trip. People searching for Make My Trip and downloading the app. Plus, for example, programs like referral, which is obviously, not a direct organic, but your existing users are driving growth for you, which is kind of organic growth. So, and plus in inorganic growth, all that stuff, for example, you are driving traffic through Google ads, through Facebook ads, through affiliates, etc. All that comes in inorganic growth for us. So as a company, our focus is to drive more and more organic growth. Yeah, as of today, we are doing both, but focus is to drive more of organic growth, right? So, and when we say, for example, growth, and so these are all the programs we are running to drive growth. But at the end of the day, we have very golden metrics we have created internally to define whether that traffic we are acquiring is a quality traffic or not, right? And now let's say if I am acquiring 100 users a day, if now I am optimizing for my own aha moment, right? We always hear, for example, what is the aha moment of a company? So when we say that, that means that if a user is doing that particular moment, that particular action after installing the app, the probability of that user coming back to the app next time is much more than what what if a user doesn't do that activity. So, I mean, as a company, it's very important for us to identify that what is that aha moment for us, for our product.
So Ramit, just to interject here and ask your question. So uh, I think that the biggest driver or the most important metric for the Make My Trip app would be transactions, right? Whether it's a transaction to book a flight ticket or it's a transaction to book a hotel or anything like that. So how do you sort of optimize for that so that the new users that you're acquiring organically are going through the transactions, and what are the metrics that you track around that? Like, for example, do you see a difference in, let's say, a transaction window between a user who was acquired from an organic channel or compared to the user who was acquired via an inorganic channel, let's say via paid ads? So do you see some difference in their transaction windows or the time it takes for them to make the first transaction?
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, rather than more than time, it's about obviously we optimize for, let's say, transactions. Make My Trip, I mean, is a booking site right now. So basically, transaction is the optimization function for us. But if you ask me one golden metric which we optimize for in the session one of the user after installing the app, that is not transaction, because obviously if I'm acquiring 100 users, not more than 4-5 would transact in session one. So I mean, if I try on optimizing for 4-5, I mean, I'm losing out on a very broad base.
Yes.
And obviously most of the folks won't even transact in in session one. So the metric we optimize for example, the aha moment for Make My Trip is the search, right? A user installing an app and searching for a particular flight, hotel, or cabs, or holidays, or for whatever thing the user has installed the app for.
I think that's a wonderful learning here, because even though the business metric is to drive transaction, when we are building apps, we need to be cognizant of the fact that the user might not go ahead and transact in the first go, or that might not be the intention when the user is onboarding on the app. So it's important to find that sort of an experience for your users, so they get to use your product, or they are better versed with their product. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, the point is that how do we get to that aha moment for us, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like that we thought about it and we thought this looks like a golden metric for us and we took it, but actually it's proven through data. I mean, we have, so I mean, last year, I mean, frankly, 1.5 years from now, basically we were only focusing on growth. We were not really focusing on retention, but last year we realized that focusing only on growth is not going to bring us the business value. So that's when we started identifying that what is that aha moment for us which we need to optimize for. And we have seen, like, for example, the users who search, I mean, in the very first session after installing the app, the retention rates, which is W1, M1, and the conversion metrics for that particular set of users is much higher than the users who do not search in the session one. So, and
Right.
yeah.
So Ramit, I have a question here. Sorry if I'm interjecting. So
Yeah.
you mentioned about having a sort of a paradigm shift between your core focus on just growing a user base to retention. and then you came up that with the hypothesis that search was something that was that metric that you can track for retention, and that was showing you some down the funnel growth in transaction or in business value. Like, let's assume there is another app which is trying to now figure out what could that retention metric be. Can you share a little bit what were if there were some other metrics that were giving competition to search, and how you actually tested it and came about in defining that, okay, search is my retention metric?
Yep. So I mean, so let's say, so when we started doing this, so we figured out that, for example, sign up. Let's say user installing the app and signing up, and a user who is signing up, and after that he's making the search event, or maybe there's a user who is not signing up and is making a search event. So those were kind of the very early success criteria for us. And for example, a user is installing and interacting with the offers, right? So there, ultimately, what we are getting a intent of the user, that user has a purchase intent, right?
Right.
So we started with top events, which is the search events, which is login sign up events, which is interaction with the offers, etc. So obviously, I mean, a user who has done all the three events, the retention rates for that particular user would be much higher versus user who has done, let's say, login and search, and a user who has done, let's say, only search. But the problem is that the moment you start optimizing for three different metrics, you are not able to optimize, because I mean, at the end of the day, if a user has installed the app, there's only one goal which I need to identify for that particular user to make them reach that goal.
Absolutely. I think that's one piece of key advice for our entire audiences. When you're optimizing for your app for a metric, like, it has to be laser sharp focus on that one particular metric. Run an experiment, try to optimize it, and like, if that does not work, then try to do an experiment with the second metric.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So moving on, let's talk about the mobile product strategy in the Indian ecosystem.
Yeah, so I mean, what I wanted to basically cover here was that, I mean, over the last 6 months, we are like seeing a very different kind of user base which is coming to MakeMyTrip. Because I mean, MakeMyTrip right now is at a scale where, I mean, we have almost captured the, you can say, the top tier of the internet base, or the top, let's say, 10 to 20% of the internet base, and now we are penetrating to tier 2 and tier 3 markets. And so there, the kind of user base we see is very different from the kind of user base we already have. So when I say that, I mean, it's not only distributed by tiers, which is like top tiers, metros, and tier 1 and tier 2, but it is distributed by various device types as well.
Oh, yes. Especially the fragmentation on Android when you go to lower tiers is insane.
Correct. So I mean, I can quote an example. Now, let's say when Jio was launched in December, right?
Yep.
So there are like many. So we have seen like insane, I mean, user growth on a platform. So, but the kind of users who are coming on board, I mean, we saw, like, for example, the device types of those, majority of the users were on a low end side. So when I say it's like low end, the definition of low end is, let's say, devices which are less than 7K. Okay, 7K price range, 7K price range, right? So, but I mean, the user behavior of those users and the product and the product capabilities, for example, the mobile native capabilities of those devices versus the user base, which is more affluent, right? Which is the top tier user base. We can't have the same product experience for both the base.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. So, I mean, as of today, we are like acquiring more than 50% of our traffic from the low end devices. So which is quite a significant percentage for us, and we can't have the same product experience. So I mean, we have seen like the conversion metrics for a user who is on a high end device versus a low end device. There's a stark difference between the two. So now the focus for us is to how we can improve. I mean, we are like very much optimized for the top tier of the segments, But yeah, now that we are growing into the segment which is beyond like say 20 to 30 million base, the top tier base of India, now we need to really optimize that how we can improve the product experience for the low end devices, which is where India is moving.
Right. I'll just want to interject here for a minute to put in a little bit of more context here, because I'm sure a lot of people would be thinking right now, okay, we are not yet there, with 20 million user base, so we might not, necessarily think about this. But when you are creating a product for the target market, there are so many products, especially mobile apps that are coming up that only cater to these segment of users, right, which are on the lower end devices. So it's very important to understand, like for example, a fashion label like Cooves might not be interested in growing their user base, to these because they are not the users who are going to go and buy a 10,000 rupee dress. So most of their users are on iOS or higher versions of Android, which is why it is important. Like even if you're a small app, you need to study your target market and see what kind of devices they are on. I'll let you continue, Ramit. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So I mean, even so from that point of view, I mean, that should reflect in your acquisition strategy as well. So for example, as a company, if you figure out that I only want to acquire high-end users, so you can optimize for that, I mean, through your growth programs or through your acquisition strategy. For example, if you're acquiring traffic from FP, you can do a very device specific targeting there. And similar for other affiliates, or even through your growth program, through your organic growth programs, you can optimize for certain device types.
Right.
So, but yes, I mean, but so what is that leading for us in terms of, for example, when I say that a distributed platform strategy, that means that, I mean, right now, so we figured that trend last year, right? So that's why we launched PWA. So if you see Make My Trips mobile website, that is very optimized for slow network connections plus low-end device types combined.
Right, and also those devices might not have that much memory in to install multiple apps. So I think we'll be covering more PWAs or progressive web apps more in detail in the coming slides. So Ramit, at Make My Trip, like for example, you have separate teams which, let's say, work on product strategies for lower end devices, and then like how does that come together? Like if I have an app and let's say I want to target these 5 different buckets when it comes to the product, like what is the process that I might follow to make sure that it should come together? I know it's an edge question, because in the first place it's difficult to do product management, and then you are adding another layer wherein you say, okay, these are the different buckets of our product. Like how do you go about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very challenging operationally as well. So one is to identify that particular different bucket of users. So now let's say you have identified that successfully. Now it's kind of for example, a totally different platform you need to build to cater to that requirement. So now doing that in a small company is still, I mean, I would say manageable, because given that you do not have a lot of cross team dependencies, but doing that in a large size organization is quite tough, because when you're launching a altogether new different platform, you would obviously need to have all your different line of business, all your different categories, etc. on the website. So that's like launching a new website again.
Right, like the way you did with PWA, it's a completely separate platform that needs its own attention.
So the way to go about it is, I mean, just to answer your question, is that the way to go about it is, I mean, creating a separate team altogether. You can't do that with the existing team, I mean, which is already taking care of, let's say, the main Android platform or the iOS platform. You have to basically segregate the team which is specifically working on creating the PWA platform.
Okay, great. Shall I move ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. Personalization. I think that this is one of the key factor that can drive engagement. So how do you do it at Make My Trip?
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about personalization, right? So the most important factor, I mean, in personalization is first to, I mean, identify, I mean, first to create a customer view at your level. I mean, right now, so let's say we should know that what are the different customer attributes that we need to have a view for, so that accordingly, then that builds the basic foundation to personalize the content for different users. Now, when we say personalization, so I mean the personalization can exist anywhere. It could be in-app personalization. I mean, if it is your app, it could be personalization within your app. And now, if it is
Yep.
your website, personalization the website. If I mean personalization can exist in your post-sales experience. Personalization can exist in your marketing communication strategy. So it's like all the different. You have to think about all the different touch points that where personalization needs to be done.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Ankit.
yeah, so like let's say in context of Make My Trip, how did you start with personalization? Now, when you answer this question, I want you to break it down into two parts, because when I was building my app, and first of all, there's just so much to do. You need to build out the product. You need to ensure that your basic user experience is fine, and then as a product manager, you need to make a decision as to how much personalization is too much personalization, or sort of it stops adding incremental value. So like if you were to rate some of the personalization features in Make My Trip, whether it's on the website, on the PWA, or on the app, like what are the top components, and then how did you extend those?
Yeah. So I think the most important factor when you start thinking about personalization is that what is the metric you are basically optimize. I mean, you are personalizing for. So for example, I mean, for Make My Trip, I mean, conversion is one metric. Second is basically engagement, that I want to increase the engagement time of the user in the app, which is not a primary metric for Make My Trip. So right now we are optimizing for conversion, let's say, right?
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
similarly, for an app like, let's say, Facebook, so when Facebook is personalizing your content on, I mean, your video content, the most important metric Facebook is, I mean, following is the time spent in the app.
Right.
Similarly, now let's say similarly a news app, let's say In Shorts. When In Shorts is basically personalizing your content, it's again, I mean, maximizing your time spent in the app, because that's from where their ad revenues will come. I mean, depending upon how much time user is spending inside the app.
Absolutely. So I like to
Yeah.
add on to that question. When you're doing search, or when you're optimizing, let's say for the search metric, right? So that as a user, I go download the app and I see the search screen first on the home screen, and that is a metric that you are tracking in the backend as well. So like, do you currently use some sort of segmentation and machine learning techniques to ensure that the search experience is personalized?
Yeah, so the way we have done personalization and where we are in the journey, I would say that, I mean, we started with the offers personalization for our users on our apps, right? So I mean, for example, the offers which you see on Make My Trip homepage, those are like personalized depending upon the user's context and the user activity. I mean, when I say context, now let's say if you are based out of Delhi versus if
Yeah.
somebody else is based out of Bombay, the offer types with the offers which you will see would be very different, right?
Right.
And similarly, now when I say user activity, which means that if you have done a particular search, if you have done a flight search versus you have done a hotel search, your offers will change.
Right. Right.
Right. So those are like the starting points. But now the extension to that is basically now let's say we are what we are working on. We are now working on personalizing the complete homepage experience for Make My Trip, which is it will have the complete context in terms of what a user has done in the app in the last, let's say, X period of time. That all that user data will be leveraged to show you the most relevant content, which is most relevant to you at this point in time to maximize the conversion from the user.
Perfect. And how do you sort of define the expected outcome of personalization? Like if you can share an example of, okay, if you're personalizing the search experience, how do you track that personalization is increasing the value?
Absolutely. So I mean, so for example, for offers, so when you personalize the offers experience for users, so one is definitely that how many users are interacting with you. What is the CTR of the offers when the offers are not personalized versus when the offers are personalized, right? And
Yeah.
similarly, we link that to the conversion metric as well. That how much transactions are coming from the. So obviously, we do a lot of test and control as well because I mean at different point in times the different market conditions you can't compare pre and post. So what we do is that we create, let's say, segment of users, we create test and control segment of users, and then we do a lot of personalization and measure the impact that whether the personalized the bucket of users is converting more or not.
Okay. Sounds good. So moving on, let's talk about some of the latest technologies in mobile which are enhancing the experience. I know we touched upon progressive web apps, but since Make My Trip recently launched and the whole a lot of other players, big players are building on PWAs. So to give a quick recap, to the audience on what progressive web apps are, those who don't know. So they leverage some of the latest technologies that have come to the web browser. To be technically more specific, something known as a service worker, so that a lot of your app can work in the offline mode and the data is caged. So Flipkart, they led the pack of last year, and they saw, I think, around 92% decrease in the data that was required for the first transaction. That's a tremendous result. You guys, you can Google it, and there's a case study by Google on this. So that is what progressive web app is. You can give the experience can be, at par native in most of the cases. I'll let Ramit take it on from here.
Yep. So I mean, so progressive web app is, I mean, obviously the experience is much faster. I mean, if you compare it with one normal, for example, your website or your responsive website. So I think Ankit rightly mentioned that I mean, obviously it works on the concept of service workers, where I mean it cached the data for a certain user, and obviously it doesn't go back to server every time to fetch the data again, and that's why it is fast. And but yes, I mean, so since the time we have launched progressive web app, we are I mean our mobile website conversions have like almost tripled. And I mean, we also have, like, for example, Google published a Make My Trip case study for, I mean, for this conversion improvements, etc. So I mean, from that perspective, I mean, it is a very brilliant solution to, I mean, optimize or improve your mobile website performance.
Right. And instant apps. So
Yeah, so I mean, the background of so I just want to cover why did we do progressive web apps? Obviously,
yeah,
I
sure.
think so. I think I think I talked about earlier that, for example, we are seeing a very heavy trend in terms of that people are, I mean, low-end devices users are coming on board, right? So I mean, we have seen that the people who are coming from low-end devices, they do not stick as much as the high-end users stick. I mean, the retention rates or the uninstall rates, the retention rates are very low and the uninstall rates are very high for those low-end devices. So that's where progressive web apps fit in, where I mean the user who do not want to keep the app, what we can give them the app-like native experience. So that is from where the concept basically we picked up the concept and we started working on that.
I have a question, Ramit, on progressive web apps. Like, only if you can share. I don't want to push the boundaries there, but from your experience with progressive web apps and also having a pretty good native app as well, are you seeing increase in user retention over a period of time on progressive web apps, or is it more of a one-time sort of enhancing the user's experience, and then the user has to come back again to the mobile website? Because like as even if the add to home screen is an option, that I don't think that there is a way to track that.
So I think that's a pretty relevant question, and I think that is something which we are, I mean, let's say, solving for. So I think you nailed it. Absolutely. So for example, I mean, if I compare the retentions for a progressive web app customer versus an app customer, I would say that is not really up to the mark. I mean, the retention for a progressive web app customer is still much lower, right? But obviously, in that particular session, the conversion rates are very comparable. I'm not, I mean, as same as Android, but like much higher than the normal mobile websites.
Mobile
So,
website.
what, yeah. So what eventually, what we need to do is we need to mix both the worlds, which is basically we need to work on something like a light app,
Right.
which is basically the app size is like 1 or 2 MBs or 3 MBs at max, and the experience is a PWA experience, but all the native mobile capabilities exist in the mobile app, which is like, I mean, why is the app's retention on a higher side? Because you are able to reach customer through notifications, you are able to communicate user through notifications, and it's a permanent property on your phone, which makes users which makes user come back to the app again, which obviously
Yes.
add to screen hasn't picked up that greatly.
And also to add that the service workers are not available on Safari on iOS. So, but that anyway was not your target audience. So when you were building progressive web apps, right?
Correct. Yeah, cool. So I think we can
Great.
cover so basically instant apps. So I think some of you might know that, for example, Google is now coming up with instant apps concept, which is, I mean, Google's whole focus is obviously to make users slightly move away from the app world, because again, that's not where the money lies for Google. So Google's, again, at the end of the day, objective is to move users away from the apps and provide an app-like experience to the users in the web world as well. So what the Google is doing right now, I mean, it's in their beta launch in US right now. So what they are coming up with the concept of instant apps, which is basically that you need to, I mean, as a company, as a developer, you can basically
Hello.
is a combination of 10 different experiences, which is like, for example, for us, flights is one experience, hotels is other experience, holidays is other experience. Similarly, so you can modularize your app into different modules and only serve that particular module which is relevant to the user in that context, which is, let's say, if somebody is searching Delhi Bombay flight. So what
Right.
I'll do, I'll just serve that flight module to the user, which is hosted on a cloud, and Google will render that native experience to that user, I mean, on the web, right? So,
Absolutely. So yeah. Go ahead, Ramit.
so I was just saying that, I mean, that is like at the end of the day, giving you a native experience on the web, even without downloading an app.
Right. So I just wanted to understand, like, if you can share with the audience, because obviously instant apps are not yet completely out. Are you beta testing it with Google, or are there any in-house efforts? How do you see that spanning out over the next few months?
Yeah, so they have not opened it yet for the Indian market, but yeah, so there's a communication from the Google's end in terms of that you can start thinking about it, and I think they'll be launching it another 3-4 months in India. But yeah, in terms of effort to do it, I mean, it's a pretty large effort. I mean, you have to modularize your app into different modules. I mean, it's not a small change for any big company. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the gains you could get out of it could be huge, because this is kind of a paradigm shift in terms of how people are interacting with the app. So I mean, this could be pretty powerful. I don't see it very powerful for high-end phones where memories, etc., is not a concern, and people are much more comfortable in downloading the apps and experiencing. But this
Yeah.
would be pretty in the low-end segment.
I'm pretty sure Apple will play it down, the instant apps bit, because they control the hardware and everything, so they're not pretty bullish on it. One thing I quickly wanted to add in here, and this is something obviously I wanted to pick your brains on. So there's the Messenger platform is coming up, and a lot of people have made Messenger bots. also in the travel domain. I think Hipmunk is one, and which works pretty well. So what are your views on it, and like how do you see that playing in the Indian market?
I don't see picking it up in India at least. I mean, and even outside India, I haven't seen any company which is like where it has picked up like really very nice. I mean there are like specific reasons for that, right? Most of the unless and until it's like it is very relevant for some very use cases, specific use cases, which is let's say a post sale use case. But I mean when you but it's not really relevant for now. Let's on Flipkart, but for your booking experience.
Right.
So I haven't seen any uptake. At least for the messenger bots anywhere. It is really helpful for some of the postal use cases. For example, I think Ixigo launched a bot I think sometime back, which is I think a good intervention for the postal use cases, and even there it has limited. It can serve limited answers. So I haven't seen any great example where this has picked up.
Okay, great. Before moving on, I have a question from Vivek. He's asking if what should he consider, progressive web app or a native app for one of his the apps that he's building. I mean, of course, it depends on the quality, the kind of the app, but like what would be the parameters that you would use to decide whether to go for native versus PWA?
So it depends on the product. So if the product is a core app-based product, which is like you are using a lot of native capabilities, then obviously you can't compare the two, and you have to build an app. But if your product is such which is like more, for example, a web, you want to give more information to the user in the starting. When I say that, you are not really using, you're not building an app like Snapchat, which is like using the core capabilities of the phone, which is camera, which is address book, right? So then I would say focus on building a progressive web app, because the experience is really, you can build a really good experience there as well. But if your product is such that you want to basically leverage some of the native mobile app capabilities, then app is the way to.
Absolutely, and one thing that I'd like to add, Vivek, is if you are not using those hardcore, or let's say you want full performance from the graphics card on the device, if that's not what your app really needs, which usually is the case only in case of building games, you can leverage code consolidation by using platforms like Cordova and Ionic. So it'll still give you a very good, you can use the same code base for both iOS, Android, and on the mobile web. It's just for when you're starting out or building an MVP around it. Great. So leveraging users' network. So what are the thoughts there from it?
Yeah, so we are seeing a trend. I think most of you have also, I think, seen that. Most of the companies right now using, so mobile as a device has like certain core capabilities, which as a product, while building a product, you should leverage, right? Your camera, your contact book, your and stuff like that, right? But obviously at the end of the day, you have to be concerned about users' privacy. But yeah, as long as what we have seen, at least in the Indian market, people do not mind giving some of the permissions which are slightly privacy, slightly more private, as long as you're providing them a real value, right? So for example, giving contacts permission to Facebook, Facebook recommends you the friend connections depending upon your contact book, and recommends a lot of other stuff, right? So you give the contact permission to Facebook. Obviously 50% of the people would be doing it, but yeah, from Facebook point of view, this is very huge. You can suggest them very relevant connections. So similarly, so this is the kind of trend which you are seeing to leverage users network, which is to leverage users contact book, leverage users connections to personalize the messaging for the user, personalizing your growth initiatives. Because let's say you send out a communication to the user, say that, hey, download my app, right? Versus you say, hey,
Yep.
Ankit, your friend wants you to download your app, and here's the reward for you. That's like a big difference. I mean, you can see very.
Sorry. I was just saying,
Yeah,
Ramit, one very good example, and I think we can take that example now, given the Make My Trip and GoIbibo relationship. So the Go Cash feature in GoIbibo's app is pretty good, because you share your contact book, and then anyone in your contact book books a ticket on GoIbibo, you get some sort of Go Cash or something.
Yes, exactly. So I mean,
that's a great example. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think people do have privacy concerns as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is in your own hands whether to do that or not. So I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people are doing that, right? So I mean, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're providing a value to the user. That is why a user is doing it. I mean, if blanketly you would ask that I need your contact permission, nobody would do it, right? Or I mean, you could say only 5% of the people would do it. So I mean,
Right.
so if I specifically talk about GoCash, I mean that's like a pretty successful product in its. I mean, GoCash plus even the Go Contacts, which I mean, GoIbibo was doing a TVC around these days. That's a pretty successful product in terms of, because that has like driven.
And Deepika Padukone is contributing to that success as well. So
Yes. I'm telling you, Deepika Padukone is giving the new numbers.
Yeah. Great. We have a question coming in from Anup. So, okay, so big one. Let me just paraphrase it. So, what he wants to know is basically, when it's a transactional app wherein the user is transacting only once in, let's say, 3 to 4 months, how do you look at re-engagement? Because I think what he's trying to say is you cannot send in push notifications in every day. Like for example, in Make My Trip, you won't be booking a hotel ticket like every week, right? Or a hotel or a flight ticket every week. So then how do you look at re-engagement, and what are the factors that lead to you sending them an email or a push notification or something?
Yep, absolutely. So I mean, frankly, I would say that we are not doing a really great job in sending out push notifications as of today. I mean, I must admit that, but yeah, I mean, given travel is.
Really appreciate that, Ramit. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I mean, even internally, we like do multiple discussions around it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, scenario is such that at the end of the day, we have the experience, the push notification experience, what we have today. But yeah, I definitely admit that this is obviously not a great experience. So, but yeah, I mean, travel as a use case, obviously, there is a very certain cohort of users which you need to. So that is where that personalization comes in, right? So there is definitely a certain set of users who travel very frequently, and for them the communication could be very relevant depending upon whatever frequency they are traveling. But yeah, majority of 95% of the users do not travel more than once in 3 months. Right. So, so that is where we need to do a very targeted communication to the user, depending upon when a user is showing us an intent of travel, rather than we bombarding with different kind of notifications. Yeah, I mean, one is that you are bombarding users with different offers, but second is that you are really providing a value to the user, even though there's no booking need. Which is, for example, that you are telling user a very really great information about a particular place now, now basically in informing user about a particular place, giving him content, right? Or now let's say a very good sweet deal has come from airlines. That is something which we feel that even if you do not have a booking need as of today, I mean, you have not shown us the booking need, right? We should communicate that to our users, because there might be that it might create a travel need for the user. So obviously we need to think a lot about in terms of what is the push notification experience, that how do we re-engage the users depending upon the different cohort. I mean, within a complete set we have like 50 different cohort of users. We need to do a separate messaging for. We do a separate messaging, but again, at the end of the day, the job is we're not doing a great job, I would say.
Okay, and that's a pretty great quality, Ramit. I must say that you need to be critical of your own product if you want to progress.
Yeah.
Let's take one more question before we run out of the time. So, how do you calculate lifetime value of a user? And that's sort of a scientific question, but I'll let any thoughts or any ideas on, or rather,
Yeah.
how do you do it at Make My Trip?
Yes, I think that's a pretty great question, and I mean, we spend a lot of time debating that how should we measure the lifetime value of a user. So, I mean, the way we do it is, I mean, we measure. I mean, for apps, I mean, what we see is that a maximum lifetime of a user on apps is 6 months. I mean, beyond 6 months is like just 5% of or 10% of your base which comes back. So, I mean, we see the lifetime of the user within the 6 months for apps, right? And so when I say lifetime, what I mean is, I mean, what is the order rate or what is the transaction rate of a user within 6 months after installing the app? And obviously that involves a lot of installing, uninstalling, reinstalling. But there we take a customer view. I mean, it's like Ramit's view, not Ramit's device view.
Okay. Yep.
Right. So we typically take 6 month view for apps, and for desktop, etc. It's very different. We basically take a view in terms of, I mean, acquisition costs are very different from the acquisition costs on app. So there the metrics are completely different. But yeah, on app, if you're spending money to acquire users, we measure lifetime value for 6 months.
Okay, great. I think there are, we have 10 minutes as your questions are just flowing in. Anjali, do you want to quickly moderate on few of the questions that are coming in? And maybe me and Ramit can take a go.
Sure. So Sagar has a question. In case of apps based on slow tech, where products are being designed to curtail or control the time that people spend on their devices, how, as a product designer, do you think about engagement?
So how do you think about engagement when it comes to low-tech devices or something like that? Can you repeat the last part, Anjali? Sorry.
So it says where products are being designed to curtail or control the time that people spend on their devices, how, as a product designer, do you think about engagement? This is in
That really depends. In my opinion, it really depends on product to product and basically what you're trying to do. Unless, Ramit, if you have something to add here.
Yeah, so I didn't get the question actually completely. It's like, I mean,
so products that are designed to curtail user spending time on the product.
Yeah, so that is what I'm confused about. Sorry. So basically, why would I design a product to? I mean, for example, I mean the Uber's experience. For example, Uber wants you to make the booking ASAP. I mean, so that could be one of the cases.
For simplicity, let's take that case because it's a little confusing to me as well.
Correct. So I mean, then you're not optimizing for engagement, right? If you want the user's booking process to be much faster, and you want the time spent in the app to be lower because you are optimizing for the booking. I mean, the simple example is Uber. Uber doesn't want you to increase the engagement with Uber app, but it just wants you to travel and travel quickly. I mean, make your booking really quick.
Exactly, and like, I think one thing that you need to add when you're like building a product or designing a product is that the initial high blip in engagement that you see, that should not be coming from a bad user experience, because there's a lot of time, you're trying to find something in the app, you're trying to find a functionality in the app, and that is taking time. But your analytic tool in the backend is tracking as an engagement. So I think you need to ensure that both the pieces are absolutely different. And I think Uber's example is great there. You do not always sort of optimize for engagement. Next question, Anjali.
So Siddharth wants to know, what are the short-term and long-term strategies for acquisition and retention of more users at Make My Trip?
Okay, so I mean, so it's only typically a long-term strategy. So when I say long-term strategy, I mean, so like I said earlier as well, the complete focus on user acquisition is to do organic acquisition. I mean, the short-term strategy, I mean, if I think about short-term strategies, I mean, if I want user growth, I can get it from paid marketing channels. That is very easy to open, and obviously all the down the funnel metrics would not be that great as the organic users. But yeah, that's a short-term way to acquire new users. But if I talk about long-term growth, we think in terms of getting more organic users, increasing the searches through brand, I mean, improving our ASO and getting more downloads from there. Plus, I mean, building, for example, growth hacks like, for example, referral program, contact programs, leveraging, I mean, users' contact book to basically get more downloads, persuade users to invite more friends. So that is how we think about basically acquiring more quality users.
All right, I think we have time for just one more question. Anjali, if there's one good question from the pack.
Just 1 second. So Pranav has a question that they get a substantial number of visitors in a day, somewhere between 200 to 300, but their conversion rate is extremely low. How can they improve that?
So I mean, so there, I mean, obviously they would need to look at the step-by-step conversion in terms of user launch. I mean, I'm assuming it's an app-based product. So if it is an app-based product, I mean, how many people are launching the app until what point people are going. So obviously, when you say funnel optimization, it's a basic science in itself. I mean, you need to really figure out that where maximum number of drop-offs are happening. There definitely either there's an information miss, which a user would need to convert, or obviously your product pricing or the value proposition is weak, because or at an overall level, maybe users are not able to identify you as a brand. Maybe because, I mean, seeking information versus converting, I'm now here assuming that conversion here is the actual purchasing something. Now, so there you need some kind of branding as well, in terms of so that users recognize your brand and they are comfortable purchasing online, making payment on your platform.
Awesome. So I think before we close, let's run one last question. We are done with the questions. So thank you everyone for tuning in this evening. If there are any questions, if there's still more questions, we're sorry we are not able to answer it right now, but I think we'll be following up with an email as well, and feel free to shoot questions to me. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get more time from Ramit on that, but I will try my best to answer those questions. All right, let's sign out, and thank you guys. We'll follow up with our next series on how top Indian apps build mobile experiences. Thank you.